Okay, this identification is about the Comstock Load, a silver strike in Nevada. And also, while we're covering this is a good time to cover some of the other things that occurred in the in westward expansion and settlement of the West, and what is also known as the Wild Wild West. Um, so so let's begin with the Comstock Load, um, which was this major silver strike in 1859. Okay, so I think you can guess that the strike was in Nevada there. So um, the red state there is Nevada, is where this gigantic silver strike occurred in 1859. There's a chunk of silver from the discovery. So this brought tremendous economic changes into Nevada. So what we could say is economic history, right? So the silver strike was publicized and brought in people from all across the United States um, to go there for jobs, to work in the large silver mining company. Um, there were some who were going to do independent silver mining, but many came there to work for the large silver mine, the Comstock Load, and was run by Comstock. So some of these shots will show you the work around Silver City in Nevada. But it should be known that we saw the map. This is in Nevada, but remember at this time in history, there were so many wide open spaces in the West, and there were so many areas in which there weren't people. And you see a road here. There were many areas that didn't even have roads, or had very small dirt roads. And people could travel to the West literally and not see another person for days or even weeks while they were traveling by horseback or wagon train or however. Um, Even now out in the West, there's a lot of unsettled area where you don't see many people. But going back 130, 150 years, you can imagine how much empty space there was. You could go weeks without seeing an Indian, uh, maybe never, and vice versa. A Native American might not see someone traveling on the road for days or weeks, depending upon the area. Um, and also, it took so long to travel. Here you see the wide open spaces. So the silver mine, though, was to bring people not just all over Nevada, but to the direct location of where the mine was mining silver. So, and then little towns sprouted up around the mining area for workers. Little towns sometimes of 10 people, to where the workers would have a place to live and then go and work in the silver mine. This one's a larger town, Silver City, by Carson City, in which now you have workers coming for jobs. That's what they were coming for. And what are the kind of jobs they would have? Manual labor, pushing wagons, doing mining. You needed people to build the houses, and you needed cooks, you needed chefs to feed people. Um, there was some liquor being sold, bartenders, restaurants, uh, preachers, all kinds of things, not just mining. And this was pretty much a standard thing with all towns in the West in which these kind of jobs would sprout up. So there's another picture in Nevada. There's Carson City, where the Comstock Load happened, and it brought in work. It brought in money, and people could make a lot of money in the silver. But then some of the miners were just working for wages, and Then you had some other small mines where people were trying to get rich by themselves. And then, not surprisingly, Nevada then applied to become a state and, and became a state. So the Comstock Load really led to Nevada becoming a state, and it led to all kinds of economic development around the mine. So in this section on the Comstock Load, I'm going to cover more on similar things that happened. This is what is called the West, or the Wild Wild West. So and quite a bit of interesting things went on at the same time in the West too. The mail was delivered by Pony Express, like one rider carrying small amounts of mail in relays. A very daring and physically taxing and dangerous job, taking mail across the West on a horse. You could be attacked by hostiles, especially robbers and who knows who, bandits, and then of course the elements. And there was a route of the Pony Express delivering mail, small amounts of mail, obviously. So important mail was delivered, and there was a relay of many riders. This era was about to come to an end, though, as wagon trains and real railroad trains started to come along. But it was quite a daring era. Another shot of what could be the Pony Express rider. Also going on, you can see there's a shot of Nevada, but there was a settlement going on in small towns sprouting up around that silver mine, gold mines, cattle drives, all kinds of other economic activity. But it took a certain kind of mentality to go into these new areas to work. And so this is a wagon train. I actually have a book on women in wagon trains that I sometimes talk about in class. But this is a wagon train map in which wagons travel across the country carrying people and goods in a very slow, very dangerous trip, but they could bring to tremendous changes and opportunity also. There's a picture of the wagon trains. Daring and exciting change for some people who wanted to get away from maybe some of the congested cities and maybe the lack of jobs in the East. And high rents and things. So they wanted to go to a new life and they wanted to be in the wide open. So they went in these wagon trains and traveled by pulling horses and wagons as a group. And then as a large group, they would be safe from being attacked by natives or by bandits and robbers because it's a large group. So that was another advantage of traveling as a group. It looks like a broken wagon that needs to be repaired. So people who knew how to repair wagons were wanted on the trains, so wagon train. These wagon trains were full of men and women and many children. Many women gave birth even during the trip as they moved west. Another thing that changed the West was the transcontinental railroads. You could all these trains being built in the West by many different people, Irish, poor Irish who wanted a job, immigrants who came in from the ocean, Chinese were working on the trains, other ethnic groups. Basically, if you needed a job, then you might want to work building the trains, and that brought people employment that way. And the trains were built, so that replaced basically things like the Pony Express and eventually very much phased out wagon trains. And so when wagon trains became phased out and were being replaced by trains, another really big change at this time was the gold being discovered in California, and that created the gold rush. And the gold rush was a little different than the silver rush because this rush kind of, instead of being a big mining company, you had a lot of small, like, entrepreneurs trying to get rich by mining the rivers themselves. So it brought an individualistic type breed of people. You see gold there, a few large bowls of gold could change a person's life. More gold being mined along the rivers, sifting the water and sifting the gold out. So in many ways, it's a better job than working in a silver mine where you have to dig deep into a mountain because you're more. There were some silver mountain gold mines that went in the mountains too, but there was a lot of outdoor gold mining like this, which at least to me looks to be more likable of a job. And so, villages, it's brought it up around the gold mining and created jobs for many people who weren't miners, but and just try to think about the kind of jobs that you might have. Um, you see a small little store, a bakery. Food was very important. Keeping food fresh, delivering food. Cooks and chefs were in demand. People who knew how to keep food safe and to feed many people was a big issue. So that was the job. There were some miners, but these miners are by the water. There you go, a bar. So certainly alcohol was in demand for people in their leisure time to have a few drinks. So yeah, many women went out west too, and you had men and women. Women had many. The women worked not just in dance halls, but they worked cooking and taking care of hotels, hotel hospitality industry. Um, some did mining themselves. So there were many different kinds of careers for women, and they would get married too and work as a family. You see children. Children were in these tent areas, many times around mining or gold mine areas, and then later around cattle drives. Um, Now this is the kind of mine where you go into the mountain. That's harder, more dangerous work. But there was quite a few mines like this too. And then some pictures of this lady from the old west. Oh, see, you have a barber shop and a saddler. So there's another two different kinds of jobs where people could basically make a living. Another saloon, and then you see here workers doing some kind of digging or farm work. There's something to do with the mining also. You see this fellow; he's pretty happy. I think he's found some gold. And then they would have to go. There would be banks that had to keep the gold on exchanges to where you sold the gold to where they would sell for a good price. But then you needed lawmen because there would be robbers that might try and steal the money that you made from selling your gold. The little town. A lot of these are still out there. They're abandoned. They're called ghost towns. A lot of them are still out there in Nevada and in California and Arizona. This lady on a wagon with her horse. Okay, another girl at this time in the Wild West. Okay, we see these riders. like we have female writers here in the West. Okay. So yeah, the shots, here's just a couple of shots of the land. You have, even though you had these pockets of these mining towns and these cattle drive towns sprouting up, you have lots of open land. It's still there, but then it was even less populated. This looks like Utah. A river. Another beautiful shot. And so the railroads became more and more important in the settlement of the West. There's an old railroad, small little station. And then, of course, the tracks were laid and the maintenance for the tracks. It required more and more people from the east and other areas to travel for careers and jobs. So this is a shot, and this is in your textbook, a similar one of cattle drives bringing up cattle north for food, for meat. And so the cattle being driven from Texas up north to supply food to the growing populations. And then when you hear of the Wild West, one of the places you hear associated with the Wild West, and as long as we're talking about this, and we began this discussion with the Comstock Load, but we're on the Wild West now. Deadwood was famous as a town for outlaws and for the Wild West. Deadwood, South Dakota. Wild Bill Hickok was like a famous gambler and writer. Not really a bad man, though. He was not like a person who robbed people like many of the others out there. He was actually eventually shot in the back. He was known to be a gambler, but also great with horses. And he was shot in the back by a robber. And there is his statue. So that's Wild Bill Hickok. He's buried at Deadwood at Mount Moriah Cemetery. And there is, we talked about Annie Oakley, but this is another famous woman, Calamity Jane, and she was buried next to Wild Bill Hickok. There's Calamity Jane. And she was also in Deadwood. Her dying request says at the bottom, "Bury me beside Wild Bill." Another shot of Calamity Jane. Colorful name there, Potato Creek Johnny. But now you had some really rough characters out there too, like Jesse James or Frank James. Jesse James was a bank robber that the lawmen were always trying to capture. He would rob banks, trains, and became a well-known outlaw. Another one, Billy the Kid. Some people saw them as heroes or legends, but they were tough characters who would kill you if you got in their way. Now, Sheriff Wyatt Earp was considered to be one of the great sheriffs of the Wild West, and he was responsible for capturing many of the gunslingers and robbers. And another, famous sheriff, Pat Garrett. So there were lawmen spreading out all over the place trying to stop the growth of crime. So, okay, we'll conclude this with the mining again. We can see someone a little later, in another decade, but they're measuring with probably gold. They seem quite happy. And then of course, this film much later, silent film with Charlie Chaplin, who you may already know is attached to the history of St. Augustine College. But this is a film he made called The Gold Rush. Okay, so we've talked about the Comstock Load, which occurred in 1859, was a silver mining rush that brought many jobs and miners to the area. and also as part of a larger settlement of the Wild West.